You're now plugged into the Delphi podcast.
Hey everyone, it's Tommy. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have on one of our portfolio companies, Taofu. I have both founders, Mitch and Mikel. How's it going, guys?
Very good. Thanks for having us.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Mikel, let's start with you. We'll get a bit of your background. We'll go to Mitch, and we'll dive into the project.
Yeah, my background is mostly in the DeFi part, specifically on EVM. Just over 3.5 years ago, me and my partner set up a regulated DeFi native yield farming fund here in Amsterdam, which to my best knowledge was also the first one to do so in the Netherlands. And after doing DeFi full-time for like 1.5 years as a business, I also fell in love with the concept of building a DeFi protocol myself, which led to the first builder endeavor of deploying lending and borrowing market called Lendl on the Mental network. And after doing that for a while, Mitch red-pilled me into Tao. We got together to see if we could somehow find a good marriage between my background and his. From that, Taofu was born, but I'll leave it to Mitch first for his background.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Mitch. Of course, one of the co-founders of Taofu. My background in crypto is more on the growth side of things, where I've helped exchanges and other platforms doing big growth campaigns. And one of the main reasons for ever coming into crypto was sort of to gain access to high quality deal flow, which is kind of aligned with what, say, Echo or Legion or Taofu are doing.
That's awesome. So, Mitch, you were the one that red-pilled Mikel into Tao. What was that like? Was that like a late night talk? Was that over time? It's always interesting to hear those stories because we all remember getting red-pilled into crypto.
Yeah, so for Tao at the time, it was like around the GPT moment where I really realized that AI would be the next big thing in tech in general. And then there was this guy in a shared WhatsApp group that we were in together. And he kept on rambling on about Tao and why it's special. And at some point, I just decided to look into the white paper. And when reading that, I was like, oh, wow, this actually might be the next big thing. And that's like pre-Subnets, pre-dTAO, pre-everything, when everything was really premature and early. And then after doing some digging into like the people that were following it on the sidelines, I saw a lot of Eve maxis basically following this. And that made me realize that this might be the next big thing. And then I reached out to Mikel and a bunch of other friends like, hey, it's trading really low right now. We might need to buy some.
That's awesome. When was that? How long ago are we talking?
I think this is like end of 2022.
Nice. So that was like, so Tao's at 10 bill FDV now. That was pretty early in the life cycle.
Very, yeah. I think that's also one of the parts which made Tao interesting at the time. I think we got in at like a 180 million market cap.
So give me the genesis for Taofu. So you find Bittensor quite early. You're spending a lot of time. You're seeing, the early subnets, the early community. You've watched it for the past, let's call it, I think, several years now. How did you come up with the idea for Taofu? And let's just dive into exactly what Taofu is doing too.
Yeah, well, it's a long story, but like the start of Taofu, we saw that there wasn't really an easy way to buy Bittensor at the time. So we figured, why not make like a liquid staking protocol for Tao and do it in a way that it's institutionally friendly, so that people or institutions with a lot of capital would have a safe way of holding and acquiring Tao, as it wasn't really listed on any exchanges. And there was like one custodian here in the Netherlands, actually in Amsterdam, that offered these services for Tao, and they were the only ones doing that. So we set out to build like the liquid staking protocol and STAO for that. And then at some point when the MiCAR regulation got announced, it actually became impossible for us to continue the concept as they backed out. So we had to build it ourselves. And then basically after taking 6 months to build the whole custodial setup ourselves and make it institutionally friendly and all that stuff, dTAO got announced. And basically dTAO then destroyed the concept of building a liquid staking protocol, at least for us.
What is the main innovation behind dTAO for you guys? Like, how do you view that changing the Bittensor network? I mean, plenty of people, including myself, have talked about it on Twitter, but I'm just curious how you guys view it and how you view that helping Tao long term?
Yeah, I think the largest shift that dTAO basically enforced onto the network is a change of power dynamics from a vote-based system where a number of or a limited number of large validators get to decide where the incentives are allocated. It is now fully transformed to an economical and market-based system where price dictates how much incentives all of these subnet gets. And so the largest change is basically just from a limited amount of people setting weights in a risk-free way to market dynamics. And you're going to have to put your money on the line if you believe something and put the money where your mouth is.
That's helpful. So let's dive into Taofu a bit more from first principles. Like, I don't know if we should describe how you guys are helping subnet owners, or we should describe like end to end how it works. How do you guys want to take like the intro to Taofu?
Yeah, maybe as like like a bit of general background information, the way the emissions work on Bittensor. So on Tao, miners can secure 41% of the rewards, validators secure 41%, and then subnets secure 18% at this current stage. And then the amount of emissions a subnet would get, the emissions I just described are per subnet. The amount of emissions in Tao that they would then receive really depends on the EMA of the subnet. So the higher the token price a subnet is trading at, the more emissions in Tao the team behind that or the subnet owner would earn. So I think that's like handy to offer like some background insights. And then right now, what you have on Bittensor and the subnets that are there, there's basically no easy way of access for most people to invest in these things, not even for VCs. Everything's happening behind closed doors, and it's kind of being gatekept. So you don't really know, okay, who are they funded by? What is the exact deal? What is the market structure? And if the investors or other partners have like some sort of stake in a subnet, there's no real way for them to have like an exit strategy. There's no real exit other than dumping the alpha tokens that are tied to the subnet into the pool. And if you would basically sell your alpha tokens into the pool, it would then also hurt the future emissions of a subnet, basically making it a less interesting case for them business wise to continue or be incentivized to continue development of the subnet itself. And that's basically what we're looking to solve with Taofu. And then we can go like a little bit more in detail on that.
That is really helpful. I mean, so if you want to launch a subnet on Bittensor, which has dozens and dozens of subnets, the only way to do so without Taofu would be like, what are your options before you guys exist? Like, is it raise VC money and fund yourselves? Is it be personally rich? Is it convince the community? Like, what was the path before Taofu?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting and sort of a double asseted question where before the dTAO migration, the registration cost for a subnet was really high, in the orders of like 1 mil plus in dollar terms, which is not something that many teams can just pay out of pocket or bootstrap. And furthermore, it was sort of a lockup. So then you register the subnet, pay the fee, and if you deregister the subnet, you get back the registration cost. So you basically needed a bank to provide said money. But now post-dTAO, registering a subnet burns the TAO, and the registration cost has come down by quite a bit. So I think on average, subnets register for around 150 TAO right now, which is a lot cheaper than the 1,000 plus TAO that it used to be. So registering a subnet became more accessible now in regards to before dTAO. So hypothetically, you could now do it out of pocket, but the more important part for Bittensor as an ecosystem and also for Taofu's role into this ecosystem is that now there is no longer the need to find an entity with very deep pockets in terms of TAO willing to basically lend you the TAO for registering the subnet. Because now the registration costs come down, Taofu democratizes the process of funding for new and also for existing subnets, without having the need to lock up too much of the TAO for registration. So most of the funds from the raise can actually be can be put to work operationally to fund the business or to validate on their network.
That is really helpful. Yeah, trying to get $1 million loan for a subnet must have been difficult. You guys probably saw some like pretty good projects not launch given that barrier, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and also unfortunately, some of the deals that were provided, where people did help co-fund the subnet slot, were quite predatory, meaning that the subnet owner would have to renounce quite a large chunk of their ownership or of their alpha tokens, because there was basically this power position where you didn't really have any other option. And then when it's like a supplier's market, so to speak, they dictate the terms.
Yeah, that is quite annoying. You just lose so many shots on goal when the barrier is that high. So turning to Taofu, so if I want to start my own subnet, I have this phenomenal idea. I go to Taofu, and could we just run through like a sale process end to end, like mint, price and curve, vest, like the custody? It'd just be awesome to hear for potential people who want to launch a subnet on Taofu.
Yeah. So there's two parts of this. First, it's good to provide a bit of background where Bittensor is a substrate-based chain, meaning that it's built on the Polkadot SDK. And then we have a frontier integration for the EVM, which basically means it's not an L2, but it's an EVM sort of way to communicate with the base chain. But the subnet logic mostly lives on the substrate part. So the owner is registered to a key pair consisting of like a cold key and a hot key. And upon wanting to tokenize on Taofu, the full ownership of the owner key is transferred to a joint multisig wallet, where Taofu is a cosigner, subnet owner is a cosigner, and two trusted third entities are cosigners. The subnet owner is then granted proxy access to the admin palette, meaning that they can run operational upgrades to the subnet, but they cannot touch the financial part, so the alpha. For that, we need full co-signing of the multisig. Once that is done and secure, on the Bittensor EVM side, we then generate a contract specifically for each subnet, where the contract mints 21 million fungible tokens, which we call SNSs, Subnet Seeds. And the subnet owner then gets to decide how much of their Subnet Seeds they want to sell on the launchpad. It can be 10, can be 20, can be 30%, anything they'd like to go with. The Taofu funder base can then fund the subnet. Once the sale concludes, the participants can claim their SNSs. We automatically add liquidity to Taofu's DEX, consisting of a part of the SNSs and a part of the fund raised. And then the tokenization and sale process concludes after the add liquidity event.
That's really helpful. Would it be simplifying too much to say that Taofu is a launchpad for future subnets where the owners can sell a percentage of their future emissions upfront so that they don't have to sell their subnet tokens, which impacts the price negatively?
Yeah, that's a perfect description.
That is really cool. So if I want to launch a subnet and I go to the community, how do I decide? I guess being on the other side of the table, if I want to buy some of the subnet itself, I need to make my own guess as to the amount of emissions that subnet will receive from the network, right? I guess that's the biggest what if question.
Yeah, of course, it's really hard to expect something prior to having the subnet live on how good it will perform. But just like anything else in crypto, you have like an aspect of speculation. You have an aspect of like a team being really skilled and executing on what they're setting out to do. So if the team really delivers on what they're supposed to be building, and then also they have their alpha locked into a multisig through Taofu, then that's also really interesting because that would mean less selling pressure on the alpha token itself, alongside with like a good skilled team. Then you would expect that would drive positive price sentiment to their subnet, and therefore then also acquiring more emissions.
One other question I had for you guys is, it always felt like there are a small amount of potential subnet slots, right? Um, on Tao attracting emissions, but for Taofu to be successful, you sort of want to launch many subnets, right? And hopefully some very successful ones. How are you guys thinking through, launching many subnets versus, the fight for emissions, right? It becomes quite hard.
Yep. I mean, the classical analogy, right, is that we shouldn't try to take pieces from the pie, but that we have to grow the pie collectively, which in this case sort of means, yes, there will be many subnets, hopefully in the future. And no, the number of Tau emitted per block is not going to increase. That is hard-coded. So indeed, every time a new subnet is registered, sort of the pool of people or the pool of subnets wanting to receive and tap into the protocol native incentives is diluted, which also makes for the good point that in order for Bittensor as a collective, meaning all of the subnets together, to grow, the most important factor is not to cannibalize from within the system and by launching subnets drain value from other subnets. The better goal would be to collectively strive to attract as much value capture from the outside world, be it crypto or be it Web2. But eventually, the whole goal, the whole point is to have as much value capture into the system. And then once the full value capture into the system grows, that automatically trickles down to things like Tau price and therefore total incentive value, and thereby also per subnet an increased incentive budget. And that is something that Taofu and good subnets launching can definitely contribute to.
That is helpful. I mean, two of the things I'm most excited on in crypto is obviously capital formation is a killer use case, and we're talking about that here specifically for Tao, but lowering the barrier to get that capital is just leads to more shots on goal and more creative ideas. So it's an exciting concept. One of the harder things I'm curious to how you both approach this is, it is up to the market to decide what's valuable and what isn't, but you're both in a privileged seat as to, do we think that this specific subnet will be successful or not, right? I'm curious, like, how will you go about, talking to founders, interviewing them, and making that decision of, hey, we want to help this founder launch their subnet on Taofu.
So one of the things that we look at when we're talking to teams ourselves right now is trying to find out if they can deliver on what they're promising to do, and also looking at it from a more traditional business perspective, where, say, a team is building something that would be relevant in Web 2, and if they're able to leverage Tao and basically subsidize part of their costs through the incentives that Tao offers, if they then decide to utilize some of that revenue, for example, for buybacks, because you have less costs on the normal side where you would have like hardware and infra and all sorts of expenses that you don't have on Tao, that could be a really interesting case for them to capture more emissions in the network, and also to have like a sort of easier pathway to building a profitable business. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting about teams building on Tao. And that's something that we try to look at ourselves. And then instead of always trying to do it ourselves, we also want to work in a curator model where, for example, we can work with the guys from Contango or, Yuma, where they would then take charge of doing the due diligence on the teams and companies that they're working with before that they're actually going on Taofu. Because we want the best for the people investing through Taofu. And yeah, really filter out the stuff in the weeds.
That is really cool. Mikal, I'm also curious your take. Like, what are the like key things that you look for with a subnet, or sorry, potential subnet, and the founders of which to launch on Taofu?
Well, Taofu is a permissioned launchpad, meaning that you have to go basically through us in order to launch on Taofu, which makes us sort of responsible in a way for protecting the community. So what in addition to what Mitch said, what I think is very important is that we don't allow crazy valuation sale subnets. And setting a valuation, eventually the decision is up to the subnet owner, but we do have constraints as to what we deem to be reasonable barriers for setting the valuation. But then, like you also said, eventually it is an open market, it is a free market, and people have to make their own investment decisions. That's not something that we want to or can do for them. But in the grand scheme of things, to me, what's really important is that it's very important that there is a very clear understanding of what the external value capture is from the efforts of the team, and how those value captured are funneled back into the subnet. Because as a team, you have your operational business and then you have your subnet. And for some teams, the subnet is the product. But for other teams, the subnet might be a subcomponent of a larger business that they run. And specifically for the teams and companies that have the subnet as a part of the business, it's very important to protect SNS holders, that there's sort of like a guarantee how that subnet functions in the grander scheme of things. Because we don't want to fall in a situation where then the company takes off, so to speak, and they cut the profit share or the buybacks with the subnet, and then all of a sudden the whole subnet dilutes, they move their business elsewhere. Those like high level conceptual blueprint decisions, they are very important to me.
It's awesome. It's great to hear that you guys have such emphasis and effort on finding the best founders. Maybe a second order question for you, but you both spend so much time in crypto AI, and I guess there's like two hats, right? It's, we want to find the best subnets to push the Tao ecosystem forward. But on the other hand, we may want to support a project that just generally pushes AI forward for humanity, right? And I'm not sure if both of these conflict, but you might have to make a decision on, do we want to support just AI broadly or something that fills a niche within the Bittensor eco. I'm curious if you've ever had to deal with this, or if this is not an issue.
We actually have, where one of the subnets that we spoke to, they are very much on the side of wanting to build sort of the Linux for global AI, in a way where they have open source first. They want to build like global openly accessible systems for ML, for AI, for models, for everything, which is a very, very long journey, a very cost intensive journey, although a very important journey. But it's not always easy to find the right funder type for these types of endeavors, especially not in crypto, where many people are still just also looking to grow their portfolio and maybe don't have the capacity to make 5, 10, or maybe even 20-year long horizon deep tech investments. So you could almost say that they're sort of public good, or they're leaning towards public good type of subnets, which I think are very important. But like I said, it's not trivial to find the correct funder base for those.
Before we get into the first subnet you're doing the sale for, I'm just curious on longer aspirations and maybe a reach. I'm curious if you both had to pick a project type that you would love to see launched on Taofu, like dream project. Like, feel free to, obviously not OpenAI, but would it be a decentralized training project with an ex OpenAI founder? Would it be an inference project? Would it be maybe a hardware play of some kind? I'm not sure. Like, what would be the absolute dream project that you see launch on Taofu in 6 months? Maybe we'll start with Mitch and then go over to Mikel.
I think for me, it's more on the creative side. There's so much foundational stuff being built right now by extremely talented teams. But what I would love to see is music generation really leveling up, or repopulating old games through agents, more stuff in that sense. So not really traditionally on what you would expect as an answer. For me, the creative part, I think there will be so much amazing stuff happening on that front, where you could basically extend your favorite movie, have like an alternate ending. I think yeah, that direction is something that I'm really excited about for the future.
Yeah, and for me, I hope that sometime in the near future, a large base of builders, a large base of founders finds out that you can creatively deploy the Bittensor infrastructure for many, let's say, questions where you know what you want the answer to be, but you don't know or you don't even care how people get to the answer, which can be like very broad. And if you think of like the network in such a way that basically enables miners to run their own type of solution providing for your specific problem without you knowing how they do it. And if you have this like radically open system solely focused on the result without bothering about the methodology, by default, the system will be more efficient than if you put constraints on the solution providers. And so we are seeing an increased number of subnets which are sort of trying to focus on more niche use cases, which might even not need to be tied directly to either crypto or AI. And I think that will be a very interesting wave to witness on Bittensor. And on the other part, I think one quite like large issue what people aren't really realizing enough yet is the privacy issue when using mostly LLMs. People really like they don't care what they tell their LLMs in like chat GPTs or clouds or whatnot. And so if people were to realize what they're actually sharing and what they're actually doing, and then hopefully they realize that on Bittensor there's a subnet that's specific, or a combination of subnets, most likely that's specifically built to have your own trained model with your own secure storage, with your own preferences. I think that would be highly needed in the world.
This is a good segue to the TPN as a test pilot. Like, let's go into the VPN subnet. Like, let's talk ambitions there. Let's talk what the plans are and why you guys are so focused on that as the first go.
Yeah, for context, for the people is we indeed do Taofu, which is a service specifically tailored to subnet owners, and then we also have a subnet ourselves, which is called Tao Private Network, and it's subnet 65. Fun fact: it is the first subnet that's registered post-dTAO, and I think to date also the cheapest subnet registered so far, which is a fun gimmick. Nonetheless, the purpose of TPN is to have a developer-friendly and open infrastructure for any dev to tie into for building IP tunnels globally. The first use case that comes to mind then naturally is a VPN application for consumers, which is also what the team of Tao Private Network is shipping as a flagship product to showcase to the world, look, this is what the decentralized VPN service powered by Bittensor can do. But since it's an open system for developers to use, we don't know what the future might hold and what people might be building. But the important part, what it comes down to, is that TPN enables for secure and private IP connections across the globe. I think we already have over 80 unique countries where you can build an IP connection. And why this matters is it is quite important on the internet that you can hide yourself or mask your IP location for security purposes, but also for censorship purposes. One very fun example, for example, is that in Spain, the guys that streamed the football there, they wanted to stop people from illegally streaming, and so then they thought that they found out a server from which people were trying to stream. They ended up blocking Cloudflare, which led to a situation where if a football match was being streamed in Spain, half of the internet in Spain collapsed because it had nothing to do with people trying to illegally stream, but they just blacklisted one big Cloudflare server. That's a really weird situation to me, and that should definitely be people should definitely be able to avoid such situations.
So I think one of the interesting parts too about offering a VPN subnet, and I think everyone in crypto is definitely up to speed on VPNs, is that you're not only using Taofu for the coming sale, but you're using the miners on the Bittensor network to power the VPN, right? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah. So the miners are basically powering the entire VPN from start to finish. And that's saving us a lot of costs on stuff that we would normally have to set up ourselves. And then also on the crypto side, if you would try and make a VPN protocol, you would have to really get the incentives right, and it needs to be worth it for people. And we're just lifting on top of the network effects that DAO currently has to do so. And what we've built is really open, so anybody can build like their own VPN app on top of this, or any developer on Bittensor can actually leverage the API and utilize it for themselves for whatever they're doing. So whether they're data scraping or prompting different LLMs from, say, Russia or China, you would get like completely different outputs. And that's really interesting because that's all like incentivized and powered through Tao. And there's so many apps or so many things that you could think of that you could do like a similar approach for this.
That is pretty cool. How do you convince the miners on Tao to run and support the VPN? Like, do they earn token rewards for doing so? Because I'm assuming this increases the hardware requirements and complexity of running a miner.
The miners actually get paid for offering up their services in our alpha token, in the alpha 65 token. And right now, since we're still bootstrapping the network, the usage of the subnet is free, meaning that anybody with basic knowledge of how APIs works can use the subnet and build an IP connection somewhere. And in the current sprint we're working on, we're doing a payment rails deeply embedded into the subnet structure, where for anybody wanting to request an IP connection over TPN has to pay a micro transaction, which will then be used to buy back our alpha token. And so once we have that completed, it is sort of like an L1 analogy where it doesn't really matter what is deployed on the chain, so long as there's transactions, the chain can have growth. And then our flagship consumer app is also just a client of its own network, which I think is a pretty cool setup.
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool. I'm curious, what is the user experience like versus a popular VPN today? Like, there are, I'm out of my depth here, but I know that there's just like a lot of metrics around DNS leaking and how hard it is to track and things like that. And obviously just the user experience on latency. And yeah, I'm just curious how that shapes up.
Yeah, that's actually where the real fun kicks in as a subnet owner, because the parameters that you reward miners for in your subnets are adjustable, meaning that depending on how the subnet is used, we can steer the incentive mechanism in a way that incentivizes miners to do better at that time at the thing that we need, or at the thing that what the subnet needs. So until now, we've mostly been incentivizing uniqueness of geographical IP location. But depending on the type of users and the type of traction that the subnet gets through our app and third-party applications, we can basically monitor what those applications need. And if it's lower latency, we can incentivize lower latency for miners. If it's more bandwidth, we can incentivize more bandwidth. If it's more granular uniqueness of IP locations, then we can steer the system that way. So it's sort of like this ever evolving, moving river meandering to where it needs to go.
That is helpful. Let's walk through the coming sale. What are the dynamics there? When does that sale go live? If I'm a user and I visit the site, like what sort of information am I getting, and how do I, how would I take part in that sale?
So the first SNS sale for TPN will take place in the upcoming weeks. The exact confirmation of the dates we will confirm on the official X account of both Taofu and also TPN. So keeping a lookout for any of those two channels, you'll definitely be kept up to date. For now, we are collecting a funder base, so to speak, where everybody that's interested in participating in the sale, they can just hop in the Discord, request for the link, and then they can sort of already pre-register into the system. But for the sale period itself, we will have a whitelisting period which will last a couple of days, where you can register and basically show interest for the sale with your wallet address. And the sale itself will also last a couple of days. And if you have registered your wallet for the sale, you're free to participate at any given time in the sale, so long as it hasn't sold out yet, because it is a sale with a fixed price and a soft cap and a hard cap. So once the hard cap's reached, then basically the sale is done. Yeah, and for the rest, actually, it's quite a straightforward process.
And Mikel, how does vesting work for sales on Taofu? Like, because there might be a world where a subnet becomes extremely popular and gets a lot of emissions from Tao, which is different from the vesting schedule that I guess Taofu would offer. Or yeah, it's just curious because the value flows might be different on both sides.
Yeah, to basically ensure that it's a good sale for the people that participated in the sale, we have a mandatory vesting for the subnet owner part, for Taofu's commission part, and for the potential curator commission part, which by default is a linear vest over 2 years. For the sale participants, since the price of the sale is identical to the price at which we add liquidity, there is no vesting whatsoever. So if you have participated and bought SNS in a sale, when the sale concludes, everybody can claim 100% of their tokens immediately. It is just that the subnet owner and the Taofu commission and the curator commission, they are vested over 2 years.
That is helpful. And I know you guys have ambitions for the site itself to go beyond just the sale, right? You want to do analytics, you want to do much more. Like, how do you envision like the homepage itself for Taofu growing from here?
In the current form, Taofu sort of has actually four components to what we do. One is the tokenization, one is the sale, and one is the DEX. Then we also have a bridge for going from Bittensor EVM to Substrate and from Substrate back, which is not a bridge that we build ourselves. It is using the official bridge from the Open Tensor Foundation, but we've put it in a nice user experience, in a nice jacket, so that people can just use it. But more importantly, we have a governance module where SNS holders, they get to vote where the alpha that the owner key has accrued needs to be delegated to which validator. And so we have a good interface for actively participating in the governance part post-sale. And then we're working indeed on detailed analytics per subnet that we incubate for SNS holders to keep track of.
That is cool. It'll become like, way more than just a sales site. You'll have all analytics, you'll have stats. It'll be cool to see. Guys, let's switch to some of the fun stuff as we close out. I want to know what you both think about the future of AI. And the reason I'm asking you both specifically is because you've spent so much time, 5+ years in the weeds of the first crypto AI project. And on the other hand, you're, fully tuned into what's coming on the pipeline for AI subnets, who wants to launch, while watching everything go on with AI, from OpenAI to Gemini to Anthropic, etc. Yeah, I don't know the best question to ask you both, but maybe just the future of AI. I don't know. Maybe we'll say 6 months, because anything longer than that might be totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, if we look at Google's presentation, of course, last week, I think the future is extremely exciting. There's going to be so much stuff that we can do, from like repopulating old games or generating music or having like an agentic team of coworkers that you can just steer and have them do whatever you want them to do. And they'll work 24 hours a day, forever, infinitely. And I think it will go as far as, drug discovery, making rapid advancements, and basically any area in life that we really care about that will improve for the better. And that's like super exciting. And then as for the teams building on Bittensor, I think Bittensor will just evolve alongside AI, and whatever new trends emerge or new breakthroughs come through, there will be open source teams testing out their concepts on Bittensor, bootstrapping themselves in the process. And then by generating enough runway through Tao, they can then move along and start like a bigger business if they don't really get swallowed by the market of AI, which is like that's happening so fast right now for many teams. They're working on something, and then a year later, Google basically does whatever they did for free, and that's crazy. So yeah, all in all, I think life is going to be much better for anybody. Maybe we'll live longer, and that's like the part where I'm most excited about. And it really feels like Ray Kurzweil's a vision for the future is coming much faster than we would have thought maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that is helpful. The Google release just this week of May 22nd recording, so 2 days ago, was just all encompassing. It felt like they hit every single target market you could with an AI product. Mikel, I'm curious your take. Like, how do you differ from Mitch, or do you guys are you in the same boat?
No, sort of in the same boat. Sort of in the same boat. Myself, I'm also very interested to see how the robotics meets AI is going to go in the maybe not the next 6 months, but definitely the upcoming couple of years. Where I don't really see a world where people from let's say our age right now don't at least age into like 120, 150, maybe even 200. Which if I tell people for the first time, like, yo, I think I'm going to be at least 120, or maybe I'll kill myself in like a motorcycle accident or something, but I don't see any reasonable world where with the current acceleration of AI, there should be a reason for us to die from natural causes, given the advancements both on the computational side, but then also in translating that into hardware, both biological hardware, but also like mechanical hardware. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Do you guys think we get AGI in the timeline that's been shared? I think some people are saying 2027, some go to 2029, but yeah. What's your personal date on getting that?
Yeah, hard to say, but maybe sooner than we think. Maybe 2027 is a good guess. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, Mitch and Mikel, thank you so much for coming on. It is awesome to learn about Taofu. Like, just capital formation is just a massive use case for crypto, and a proven one. And lowering the barrier to just create that capital is obviously a massive boom. So really excited for Taofu, the coming sale you guys have on that Thursday, and appreciate you both coming on. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Tommy. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us, and yeah, see you soon on the first sale.
Yeah, absolutely.